All right, welcome everybody to the Lakers Legacy Podcast. Where Little Red Riding Hood? How about Little Redick Riding Hood? Because he's the one eating the Timberwolf today. Yo.
Hey.
The Lakers are officially the best team in the West after beating the Minnesota Timberwolves 110 to 103 in their season opener last night at Crypto.com Arena. Their first home opener win since 2016. That was 8 years ago. I feel like we barely started this podcast back then. Anyways, I'm your host, Jonathan Hernandez, and I am joined by my co host, Tommy Alexander. And Tommy, about last night, are you lit or what? Because the Lakers bullied the bully and bullied them pretty badly, too.
Yeah, I'm super lit. It was a fun game. It's like we've become so conditioned as Lakers fans to just write off game one as like, they'll figure it out. There's still time. It's so nice to actually win a home opener and look like the more aggressive and assertive and organized team on opening night. I mean, first win since 2016, like you said, but like yeah, it feels like even longer somehow.
It does feel even longer, and you're right. We don't know how to act after a win like that because it was such a bizarre but epic game considering the personnel that we had. I mean, this is pretty much the same roster that we had last year, except we're missing our best point of attack defender in Jared Vanderbilt, so it's slightly even worse. And this Lakers team, very unlike the Lakers we've seen the last 2 years, unless that Lakers team had their backs against the wall, because these dudes look different. And obviously, their new coach had a big say in that, and we'll get into it. So, I think the biggest thing and we can start here, get into the game recap and stuff. But from a macro level outlook, I just kept coming back to this theme of, so this is how it's supposed to be. Like, this is how the run it back team was supposed to look like under proper management. And I'm talking about the run it back team from the 2023 Western Conference Finals. I know Jared Vanderbilt's not here, but obviously Rui is here. But instead of riding the momentum that 2023 Western Conference Finals team had built up, and instead of adding on top of that, last season Darvin Ham went so many different other ways and was so disorganized and haphazard. He felt like the master of panic in a lot of ways. And we were never able to fully see this group the way it was intended to be seen. But, and I understand this is just game one, but we've also seen what JJ Redick has done in preseason. And thus far, with JJ Redick, it feels like, and I said this during media day, but it really does feel like we get a reset and a redo of this entire group, because under Darvin Ham, the narrative surrounding this group had become so toxic amongst the fan base, so much so that the fans this offseason were treating this roster like it was a Russell Westbrook roster just because no moves had been made. And I attribute a lot of that scarring to Darvin Ham. And I understand this roster is flawed, but it is talented. And overall, it's talented, but it was a talented but mainly underserved roster. And I feel like JJ Redick is starting to once again bring out what this roster can truly be ceiling wise. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely. I think, like you said, it was in many ways wasted time last season, but especially in the sense that, we had this team that we put together that looked really good and made a Western Conference Finals run. And then the coach just like unilaterally decided to not let that group play anymore together. So we never really fully, realized the potential of that group.
Yeah, exactly. So now let's get into last night's game, and I actually want to start with continue to talk about JJ Redick and his influence on everything, because the Lakers won in such a weird, uncharacteristic way, uncharacteristic for this team the last 2 years, because they won in spite of a lot of things not going their way, including obviously shooting. They only shot like 5 of 31 from three. Their starting backcourt was 1 of 12 from three. I mean, Austin Reeves only scored 12 points. D'Lo only had 9 points. Um, the Lakers somehow were out free throwed by the Timberwolves despite being the more aggressive and physical team. And I feel like a couple of those free throws were just at the end of the game because the Wolves were out of fouls. So it's like we should have had a bigger, we should have had the advantage free throw wise, but we didn't. We even had that 2 minute stretch where Bronny James came in, obviously a historic moment for the James family. And and JJ Redick had to manage all of these crazy things happening on game one of the season opener. And somehow we were still able to pull that game out. And I feel like a lot of it rests on obviously Anthony Davis, who we'll get to, but a lot of it rests on JJ Redick and his over preparedness and making sure that his players were prepared. And he even cited how prepared his entire staff was. And I feel like we tangibly felt that over preparedness and their ability to just execute a game plan to perfection. A game plan, by the way, that was very tailor made to this specific Minnesota Timberwolves team. And so, why don't you talk to me a little bit about JJ Redick? Because I know it was only game one, but it was kind of like an extension of what we saw in preseason, but now it seems like he finally, I feel like he was holding some cards close to his vest and wasn't showing us the full extent of what this team could be. And obviously wasn't showing us that not all just going to be nice and pretty sets. I'm going to let the guys go. I'm going to let the guys roll. I'm going to let AD roll. And we can eventually get into the little specific things that he did. But yeah, your overall thoughts on JJ Redick's game management overall.
I thought he did an amazing job. He did not seem to be a coach in his very first game. He seemed like he had, has been sitting up at night, like all night for months or years, maybe, like thinking about every possible scenario that could happen and every possible type of game situation and what he would do, because there was no real hesitation, right? And there's a few specifics I can point to. I think, one is, people point to the Timberwolves went on that 7-0 run and got the lead down to like 4 points in the fourth quarter. And JJ called the timeout quickly and got things back on track. And Minnesota never really made it comfortably back. Things like that we never saw from Darvin Ham over the course of 2 years. We haven't seen from a lot of coaches. I think, there's also things like there was a, fourth quarter, Anthony Edwards was starting to heat up. I mean, yeah, Anthony Edwards is an elite player. He's, I thought that going into this season, but he's just like gets better and better. He's a dangerous player. And we're, shading over two guys and trying to, force double teams and force Anthony Edwards to get the ball out of his hands. It leads to 3 straight possessions where Anthony Edwards gets assists and pretty easy buckets for his teammates. In the flow of the game, we change the coverage. And did you see JJ say, like, okay, no more double teaming, and we stop that? Mm-hmm. And just the throwing different looks at Edwards. I mean, we held him, like, relatively in check for the entire rest of the game. It was, I think, really, really impressive to watch. And I think, kind of summarized by AD after the game where he said the coaching staff had an elite game plan and we executed it. And that's a huge contrast from the same comments AD made last year about how we don't know what we're doing at times. And it's like, people can have their takes on that. It's just, I thought, where it's one game in the season, but it was a very, very validating game from a, coaches actually do make a difference perspective. I understand that, like, the best coach in NBA history is not going to take a team of G Leaguers and beat the Celtics. But, like, when you're talking about a league of margins, having an advantage in the coaching staff, or at least having a coaching staff that is not affirmatively diminishing the value of your individual players, is so valuable. And JJ delivered on every level. And one more thing I'll flag that he did well. He handled the Bronny situation, I think, extremely well. In the flow of the game, 17-point lead, he put Bronny in for 2 minutes. So the James family gets their little moment. And it was exactly how he said he was going to do it a month ago when training camp started. He said, this is how I'm going to handle it. He never wavered from that, notwithstanding, like, all the crazies online, like, acting like Bronny was suddenly going to become part of the core rotation and like take minutes away from Gabe Vincent or Max Christie. Like he just handled it exactly the way he said he was going to handle it, and it was fine. And now it's over, and now that distraction is gone. So just like he accomplished so many things in one game, and
Yep.
I honestly I couldn't be more impressed.
Yeah, and if you weren't getting like major PTSD at the 10:38 mark of the fourth quarter when
Oh my
Minnesota
god,
cut the
dude.
lead down to 4 and you were like, "Uh-oh, this feels like Darvin Ham all over again." But JJ Redick did everything Darvin Ham wouldn't have done, including calling the timeout. And then you and I talked about this, but this was the perfect setup to just sit D'Lo's ass down in
Oh
crunch
yeah.
time. Darvin Ham would have 100% come out of that timeout without D'Angelo Russell because, in spite of the fact that even up until that point, he still had the second highest plus minus on the team behind Rui Hachimura, he wasn't hitting his shot and he was playing pretty passively and tentatively. And Darvin Ham would have said, well, if he's going to be passive like that, he's not a plus on the defensive end, so I'm just going to sit him. What does JJ Redick do? He calls timeout and then he brings D'Angelo Russell back in, but the guy he subs is Austin Reeves for Dalton Connect. And then you guys know what happens from here. D'Angelo Russell becomes responsible for the next 6 points the Lakers put up, whether it was an assist or his own shot. The Lakers go on a 6-0 run, and we're back to a double-digit lead. And D'Angelo Russell gets his like mini redemption arc a little bit. And so like that to me is just maybe that's like emblematic of the type of coach JJ Redick is. And so from everything we've seen thus far, it seems that way. Like the players trust him, he trusts the players, and he will help them out when they need help, et cetera, or vice versa. So, yeah, Redick used common sense, he used math, and he used intuitive feel the whole game, which is what I really appreciated. And his ATO sets, by the way, of
Oof.
which there were many, they were flowing and they were super effective. I feel like there were like 5 ATO sets and he connected on pretty much all of them, including the very first play out of halftime. That's another thing I flagged. Like, how many times last year were we dreading coming out of the locker room and wondering what type of energy this team would have? What kind of hokey
Yeah.
speech Darvin Ham would have for this team and whether or not they would listen to him. What does JJ Redick do? He draws up an alley-oop play out of horn set for Anthony Davis, gets him an easy bucket, and we actually extend the lead from there in the third quarter. It's bonkers, So,
Yeah.
um,
No, I,
so
I think,
yeah,
the PTSD point you brought up, I mean, you and I texted offline, but it, that you got to go back, to those those of you who haven't like watched the games the last couple of years closely. That was a 90% of the time a loss, maybe closer to 100% of the time a loss against a playoff team. I'm talking about situations where this team built up a big lead against a solid team that, executed well with good players, and they cut the lead down and the momentum swung, and we never were able to recapture it. We would freeze, guys wouldn't know what to do, etc. Like AD said, etc., etc. We Game one of the season came out and just executed through missed shots, executed through some pretty bad calls, in my opinion. We never stopped executing, and it paid off. And we didn't just win by 7; it was comfortable, right? Like in those moments, I say
mhm.
90% loss. To the extent we would win, it always took some sort of like LeBron hero ball to like keep us afloat, and maintain that lead that we had built up. And LeBron had like an okay game, like mediocre game, I would say. And we didn't even really need to lean on him. And we just kept executing. And it felt, a little bit nerve wracking because of how the last 2 years have gone. But yeah, it never really felt like the game was out of hand. And it like, we were going to panic. And it was like very clear that the team knew what they needed to do to win. And they just did that.
Yeah, it was awesome, and I think we won. There were two different stretches where we won the non-LeBron minutes, and we won the
Yeah.
non-AD minutes at the start of the second quarter. When has that
Yeah.
ever happened? And actually, you can look at it. If you look at the plus minuses, LeBron and AD don't have very good plus minuses, but the other guys do. So I don't know. It was a beautifully executed game plan, but not a beautiful game, and the Lakers still somehow won. So, with regard, before we take it to break, with regards to the team's energy and activity overall, obviously a lot of this stems from their buy-in from JJ Redick, but I just overall want to credit the team for their defensive grit, their offensive rebounding, really intentionally crashing the glass. Austin Reeves had a couple of monster ass offensive rebounds. I was like, who the
Oh
hell is
yeah,
this guy? But yeah, the overall collective hustle for 50-50 balls, Rui Hachimura included, like the activity and engagement, contesting out to shots and rotating crisply. I was just, it was very inspiring basketball to watch, given again the
yeah.
personnel deficit. I have a question for you though. Do you think, and maybe we'll have to just naturally see this play out, but do you think the Lakers expending more energy on the defensive end is zapping their legs on the offensive end? I think the natural answer is yes. Do you think, I guess the real question is, do you think this will stay the course, or do they just need to get used to this sort of ramped up intensity and find their sea legs eventually? And obviously getting guys like Vando, Christian Wood, and hopefully Koloko will help as well.
So I don't think they're actually related at all.
Hmm.
I think, you know, teams that are not outlier good shooting teams always get off to slow start shooting. I mean, Minnesota, you know, they were not a bad 3-point shooting team last year. They only shot 30% last night. Obviously better than us, but like Minnesota's not going to be a 30% shooting 3-point shooting team probably this season. The Warriors, you know, the Celtics, there are outlier shooting teams that don't need like the ramp up, but other teams it always takes time. I attribute a lot of the energy and effort on the defensive end to just having guys in the right places and like guys understanding what they're supposed to be doing, like giving guys specific tasks and saying, you're doing this. So it, you know, there's like this psychological principle, diffusion of responsibility, right? And it feels like in Darvin Ham's system, and other coaches too, I don't want to single out Ham, but like in coaches that don't have like clearly defined structures and clearly defined systems, it can become a sort of situation where everyone thinks somebody else is supposed to cover something, right? But when each person has a specific task and they're solely focused on handling that task, I think, you know, that makes it better. I, I think like the effort looked really impressive, but I think a big part of that is, you know, I don't think guys are even expending as much energy on that end as they were last year because they were just in the right spots. And I think the
Yeah.
legs, that will just come with the season. And I think the shooting will come as guys get their conditioning up. And I think all that stuff will start to come.
Yeah, I think those are all fair points. I think it's a little bit related, especially for guys who aren't used to this type of intensity, like D'Angelo Russell, obviously, who's had the biggest hit shooting wise. And that's a guy you're like, he could hit threes in his sleep. But I think your points are
But
well taken with, yeah.
Even D'Angelo, I'd say like, we're not asking him to be like an elite point of attack defender. We're just asking him to like
Yeah, but
be in the right
he's
spot
like
team
lunging,
defense wise.
he's lunging out at people and like, jumping out to guys from the 3-point line. This is stuff that he has not done consistently, and it remains to be seen whether he can do it over the full course of an 82 game regular season. For somebody like D'Angelo Russell, who kind of has an athleticism and motor deficit, I do wonder whether it takes a toll on him. I don't think it's going to be a long toll because I think he just needs to get used to it. But I do agree with your point that just having a structure in place will eventually level set things for the shooters. So I'm looking forward to that when it happens. Why don't we take it to break? And when we return, we can get to talking to some of the individual players. But before we take it to break, Tommy, I have a question for you. When you eat a hot dog, where do you place the bun in relation to the dog? Do you put the bun on top of the dog or
Under.
under? Did you say you put it under the dog? Underdog? So,
Oh,
so not only is under the right place. Wait, what am I saying? Okay, here you go. So, not only is it right to place your hot dog buns under the dog, but it is also right to use the Underdog Fantasy app as your number one spot for fantasy prop betting online. Underdog is the place to play if you're a sports fan looking to win money while watching sports. Compete against other players just by selecting higher or lower on 2 or more players' stats, and you could win up to 1,000 times your money. It is currently Boosttober on Underdog, where there's a promo to play nearly every day. From now until October 27th, you can boost your profit on all NBA entries by 20%. So Underdog is literally giving you unlimited profit boosts to make basketball picks. So go buck wild on NBA opening week and make some of that cash while Dalton Connect cashes in another three. Last night, I actually had a 4-leg parlay on the Lakers game. I had LeBron James over zero point 0.5 points, which was a free promo pick by Underdog. Obviously, I hit that. And then I had Anthony Davis over 25 points. I saw the matchup against Rudy Gobert and I was like, easy, higher. And then I had higher on Anthony Edwards over 5.5 points. He got 6 rebounds. But I lost on the Austin Reeves prop. His prop was 4.5 assists. I picked higher, and he only had 4 assists. So
Dang it, Austin.
dang it, Austin, if only Austin had covered that prop for me, I would have won $55 on a mere $5 entry. But yeah, hopefully you guys can do much better than me this NBA opening week. So what are you guys waiting for? Download the Underdog app today and use code LEGACY to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. Again, use code LEGACY and get up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Higher or lower, you make the call. So turn every 3-point splash into a win with Underdog. Must be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alabama, New England, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT STEP to 53342. Lastly, New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. Underdog Fantasy, there you go. All right, let's take it to break. When we return, let's close it out by talking about some of the individual Lakers. All right, so we are back. Tommy, before we get into the individual players, so last podcast episode, when we were sort of previewing the season and previewing the regular season and recapping the preseason, we recorded after the Golden State Warriors lost, and you were very concerned. And in the moment, I feel like I did a pretty good job, trying to be respectful to your mindset. And so I kept using the word that I thought, while I kind of disagreed, I kept using the word that I thought it was a little bit of recency bias based off of the Golden State Warriors loss, that your sentiment was coming from a sort of recency bias in my opinion, because for me I still had a pretty good overall feeling from the full scope of what the Lakers players had shown over the course of the preseason, and also kind of just held the perspective that this was all just going to take some time. It's just all part of the process. Anthony Davis himself during the Olympics said this is going to take a long time. And so for me, I kind of still felt like the Lakers were ahead of schedule, but I did agree with you on a lot of points that you brought up as well. And I overall understood your cautionary point of view, but deep down inside, I guess the word I really wanted to use was, I feel like you were maybe a bit overreactionary after the Warriors loss. Is that safe to say? So I'll let you talk now that you've had some time to digest things. And I don't think it's really hindsight is 2020 from this Timberwolves win, regardless of what would have happened if the Lakers had still employed the same amount of effort and set execution that they have been doing in the preseason. I don't think, our overall sentiments would have changed. The loss would have sucked for sure, but I think I personally would have still maintained a trust the process mindset. And so, yeah, why don't you tell me about, I guess, do you want to kind of reverse engineer your initial maybe semi-panic and how that's either changed or dissipated at all, if it has?
Well, here's the thing, Jonathan. You fell for the oldest trick in the book, all right, which is the reverse jinx. Okay.
I did. You're right.
And guess what? It works. No,
You did. You're right.
seriously though, I fully acknowledge I overreacted, and I think I think reverse engineering it, right, to your point. I think what I would say is the last couple of years, how many years in a row has it been
Are you blaming
of
this on PTSD? Which is fair.
I am blaming it on PTSD. I'm like, how many years in a row has it been, oh, well, we'll see. Well, just wait till the games start. Well, the preseason's not a big deal. Oh, all this talk about like off-season process, and then it comes time to like play the preseason games and show what all the, work is, and show like make sure the lineups work together, and this and that, right? And then it's like none of that happens. And so I was starting to feel like, okay, well, we really are becoming like what it's been the last couple of years, and nothing has really changed. And
And that's fair.
I and yeah, and I think what I was not fully appreciating was there was a method to the madness this time. It wasn't just talk about there being this like secret method to the madness. There actually was a method to the madness. And I think, in the days leading into the game, you and I exchanged articles about how, or some takes and tweets about how you know, there was some speculation that we weren't really running the bread and butter sets that we thought would work for us, because we wanted to try new stuff, and we wanted to make sure we drilled the stuff that guys weren't so comfortable with. And that's part of the reason why it looks so clunky. And again, still because of the PTSD, I was not 100% sure that that was legit.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, you could tell from the first quarter, and I knew right away that I overreacted. Watching the effort and energy in the first quarter and watching the execution on both sides. I mean, one quarter of basketball, we played better defense. I mean, first of all, 48-minute game, we played better defense than any game I can recall, really. It's certainly
Mm-hmm.
first half of the year last year. But right away, you could tell that, okay, it was not just talk this time. They actually do have a plan. It sort of reminded me more of like Frank Vogel's first year,
Yep.
where, we didn't win. We started that season something absurd like 24-3, right? I might be slightly off on those numbers, but it was like a very, very aggressive winning pace. And we did not win all of those games in a super pretty way. I think, through the first quarter of the season, I think we were bottom 10 in the NBA as an offensive team. The offense sort of came around later on in that season, but every single game, it felt like we had a chance, because it felt like we controlled the game on both ends. We got the looks that we were comfortable with on offense, and we took the team. We knew what the other team wanted to do offensively, and we just took them out of it. And it wasn't because we were starting 5 elite defenders. I mean, yeah, Danny Green was a solid defender, although he's completely broke down by the end of the year and had to retire. So like, kind of on the way out, like, a bunch of aging vets who were solid, but we put them in positions to succeed. Caruso wasn't even part of the rotation early in the season that year, right? And certainly was not the Caruso that we know today. So there's like a lot of similarities that I felt between how we looked in the first game and how the start of the season went in that Vogel year.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just like, we were 5 years removed from that. I mean, that was 2019 fall that we started that season. So it has been some time since it felt like all the things that we talked about in the off season, all the things that they talked about in preseason, all the, well, just wait, we're working on it. Like, we're trying to work on the stuff that we're not good at. Like, all of those words that ultimately led to nothing, actually led to something again for the first time in a long time. And so I do think I overreacted, in hindsight, but I really think it was just because, like, it started to really feel like, okay, here we go again.
Yeah.
And I was wrong, and I'm very, very pleased I was wrong.
But you were right with the reverse jinx. So
But
credit.
actually, I was right with the reverse jinx, and I fooled you and the 5 people who
you
listen to us.
You did. And to your point about the defense, I got that exact same feeling, even though it sounds ridiculous and crazy to be like, there's no Caruso out there. There's no Kuz, Markieff Morris, Dwight Howard, etc. But when you are able to implement a structure, a defensive structure, like it seems like JJ Redick has, it's almost like once you put the parameters down, then it allows the players to sort of expend their energy in the right places instead of looking like chickens with their heads cut off. It's like giving an improv troupe a template with which they can then go wild with, if that makes any sense. Or like you can now color within the bounds, but to be as creative as you want defensively in terms of honing and funneling your energy in the right places, because you know that if you rotate here, someone's gonna have your back on the other rotation on the other end, you know? So I guess it's a good segue into talking about Anthony Davis, because obviously he was just otherworldly. And if you just look at his stats, you're like 36 points, 16 rebounds, 3 blocks. We've seen Anthony Davis do that before. But for those of us who actually watched the game, you would know this one was a different AD game, just because Redick had a plan set out for AD to unlock and unleash him, Tommy. And he just kept feeding the beast, putting AD in triple threat position. And I was actually amazed that AD had so much energy on both ends of the court to dominate both sides of the floor like he did. And I was like, how is he doing this? And I feel like part of it is obviously being in such good shape from the Olympics. But I think another part of it is just Redick trusting his superstar and really engaging AD every single time down. And honestly, kind of manufacturing not manufacturing, but kind of bolstering AD's adrenaline and rhythm with by giving him multiple touches on the offensive end. Now, intuitively, you would say, "Oh, AD is going to get burnt out taking this many shots," but in retrospect, for a guy who has pleaded for more touches in the past and who has gotten phased out of games when he's been hot in the first half, I almost feel like it had the reverse effect. And AD was flowing off of adrenaline and rhythm by the end of the game and was able to block and spike the hell out of Rudy Gobert's shot. He was able to switch out onto Anthony Edwards in the fourth quarter and bother him, and then block Dante DiVincenzo's 3-point shot, block his layup. Like, he was literally everything everywhere AD at once. And I think a large part of it was JJ Redick kept giving him the ball, and that in turn, it was like a synergistic thing where AD is always good defensively, but I felt like he was able to lock in on both ends of the floor just because there was never a moment where AD was not engaged. So your thoughts on AD and the game plan?
Yeah, I think the game plan made a huge difference, and it gets back to my point about when you put guys in the right spots, you're going to get the most out of them. And it seemed like a tremendous effort, and it was, by the way. I mean, it was a tremendous effort. But didn't you get the sense, right? And it's like, I don't think it's because game one of the season, AD and LeBron are in the best shape they've ever been in. Didn't you get the sense that fourth quarter, like both of those guys, even though LeBron had overall a mediocre game, were just like they had the energy to close?
Mm-hmm.
Like it wasn't like AD was limping over to get that Gobert block.
Yeah.
He was like fully engaged. And I think part of that, a big part of that, is he was not spending 35 minutes like running around accounting for like a bunch of people's individual deficiencies. I think he was playing within the system. By the way, he's like become a lot more of a vocal leader on that end. I don't know if you noticed like
Mm-hmm.
some of those plays where we were sending the soft double or the full hard double on Anthony Edwards, and you would see AD like basically playing free safety back there, like standing by the paint and like yelling, to Dalton, like go now, or like yelling to Austin, like go there, like navigating, like organizing the defense from the back end. And the combination of that, the combination of all of his teammates being in the right positions and all of his teammates making a concerted effort to help him on the glass, it's just like it really comes down to, and people have discussed this, and I feel like it just doesn't get enough play. It's a possession battle, right? And
Yep.
if we have to defend less possessions than they have to defend, it puts us in a good spot. And I feel like that's sort of what happened last night. I mean, of course, AD always shows out against Gobert. But I would flag that there were multiple stretches in the game where I thought that this was going to be one of those AD games where he finishes with some stats, but he ends up with a lot of free throws and his shooting numbers aren't that great, and et cetera, et cetera. But we weren't just getting him the ball. And like, often, especially last year when there was like all this talk about like making sure AD doesn't become a ghost on the team, it often devolved into throw the ball to AD and ISO.
Mhm.
Throw the ball to AD and ISO, let him either make a play off a double team or just more likely take it himself, and go one-on-one against his guy and score. Uh, we were, and it was always out of the post. In this case, it's like pick and roll out of the post deep, out of the post high, out of the post like mid post, out of like, pick and roll from every angle, like taking some 3-pointers when they're like good looks, but, taking guys off the dribble. Like it was putting him in a position to be a playmaker, but not just like go, oh, you used to be a high school point guard, like go figure something out. Like putting him in a position where like plays are drawn up to give
Mhm.
him passing opportunities. You know what I mean? Not just like figure something out. And I just, again, it's like it felt like he put up those numbers and didn't even try as hard. I mean, not to say he didn't try, obviously he did, but like it didn't feel like efforts that we've seen the last few years that ended up with like way less output.
Yeah.
It felt like the output to effort level was like perfectly in tune, and it felt like something that is honestly sustainable. Like when they were going over his line on TNT and talking about how like this is an MVP. Yeah, well, it's game one. Can't say like MVP. Maybe it's too early, premature to say MVP, but this is an MVP level, stat line. This felt sustainable to me. What he did in
Mhm.
game one, it did not feel like, how is he going to like continue to replicate this?
Well, it's sustainable because they're continuing to give him the ball every single time down the
Yeah,
court, and he didn't even shoot 50% from the field. If he hits like 2 or
yeah.
3 more shots, we're looking at a 45, 50-point game for
It
80, you know?
and he and several of his misses were like little gimmies around the basket that he makes like 85% of the time. That's part of what I'm saying. Like 80, I like every player, right, has some of those games where his bread and butter shots just don't go in for whatever reason. And 80 has really good touch around the basket, but every once in a while he has a game where nothing, his little floaters, his hook shots, like nothing goes in. And this felt like that we were heading in that direction in the first half, with some of those. And like, yeah, like I said, okay, he's getting fouled. He's making his free throws. He'll probably still put up like a decent line, but overall maybe an ineffective shooting game. But they kept going to him, and not again in the flow of an offense, not just like walk it down the floor and throw it to him. Like getting him involved, just like making sure that he is touching the ball.
Mhm.
It doesn't always have to lead to a shot, but if he's touching the ball, putting him in a situation to make a decision and either get someone else a shot or, you know, get the defense to commit to him in certain ways that opens up, an opportunity for him to pass it and then get it back. It was just like, again, we heard all off season about how JJ thought that AD was probably hadn't been used maybe to his full potential over the course of his career. There was a little more value to extract there. They wanted to explore using him as a hub, similar to how a lot of these other teams have used their skilled big men. Obviously the easy one is the Nuggets, but there are other teams have done it too. Use skilled big Sabonis, even Julius Randle with the Knicks, like have used their sort of skilled big men as a hub, to run their offense through, even if that person is not scoring 30 a night. And so it feels like this was a really, really positive step in the right direction on that front, because if they're able to keep AD involved like this, and again, I'm not even saying he has to take 25 shots a game. I'm just saying like if they can just continually find ways in the flow of the offense and their sets to make sure he touches the ball, even if it's just to pass to somebody else like quickly after 1 second, like that keeps him engaged, and it keeps him energized. And I think, we saw sort of the positive consequences of that.
Yeah, AD as the trigger man, and this goes for anyone with the ball these days, actually. Anybody who's the trigger man now has maybe 2 or 3 different options to go to. And it's not even the first guy curling off the screen, because that guy curling off the screen may be setting a down screen for the other screener, and then that guy curls off, and then on the baseline, someone's cutting. So, like, at any one point, at any one moment, there is always 2 or 3 different actions and options that the trigger man, in this case AD, can go to. And it just opens up so much more because then that also sort of, I don't know, maybe I'm getting too psychological here, but that also just opens you up mentally to freely take that jump shot because you have a fallback of like, I can go here, I can go there. And that goes for everyone in this offense, which is so refreshing to see. And I wouldn't be surprised if JJ Redick has used like Blake Griffin as his reference point because he played with Blake Griffin on the Clippers and is kind of, seeing what he can do with AD in that sense, but with an actual structured offense behind him. So we're running a bit long, but lastly, I just want to really quickly shout out Rui Hachimura because I felt like he was the unsung hero of the night. He was so physical and so athletic. It was very inspiring to watch. He bullied the bully in terms of Julius Randle. Him knocking Anthony Edwards to the side on his drive on his way to the poster jam on Gobert's head was insane. His weak side block on Gobert. I mean, I honestly have not seen Rui Hachimura this engaged in the dirty work garbage man type stuff the entire game. And I didn't even notice actually that he had 18 points because I was more focused on, whoa, Rui's got another offensive rebound. Whoa, that was a crisp rotation by Rui Hachimura. Did he just stop Nickeil Alexander-Walker on a drive and then strip the ball from him? Oh, did he just fight for position against Naz Reid on the inbounds pass and tip the ball away, get the steal, and ignite the Lakers on the fast break? Like, this is a new Rui Hachimura, and yeah, it was just very fun to watch. So, any thoughts on Rui?
Yeah, Rui, I thought was. I thought he looked incredible. I mean, he's another guy who I probably overreacted to based on a couple of defensive efforts. I thought were pretty poor in the preseason. He seemed a lot more engaged on the defensive end, but he used the physicality and assertiveness on the offensive end that again, I put this in the bucket of things that were discussed all summer. And I'm not talking summer 2024, I'm talking summer 2023. And we go into the season and an injury, early season injury holds him out. By the way, he wasn't even out for that many games. And suddenly this guy is like playing 25 minutes a game until like January, right? And after a whole season of like, Rui's developed all these offensive skills. He's gotten a lot more aggressive. He's gotten a lot stronger. He's gotten a lot faster. But we never saw that until January, February. You put him back in the lineup, and suddenly you start winning all these games. He's a really, really good player. This is like an example of why over the course of the offseason, when so many folks are talking about who we're going to trade for and how we're going to get a good player and what all our contracts are valueless. Rui as a 6'8" forward who shoots over 40% from three, hopefully with higher volume this year, can give you some decent defensive effort and pretty good rebounding, which I'd like to see him do a better job of next game. That at a $17 million is a good contract now. It's like we let our coach, who was handicapping our own players, like sort of prevent us from realizing the full value of these contracts that we have and this sort of roster that we built. And it was just like, again, really, really nice game one of the season to just see it all like come together for Rui, because we saw it in the Olympics this year in the few games that he played. We saw it last season, but you just never know. I feel like Rui is one of these guys who he had a whole season shooting over 40% from three, and still people are like, I don't know if he's a good shooter. You know what I mean? Because it's like everything's felt so sort of tenuous with him. But now that we're seeing him like in a system that is like happy to feature him and understands like the skills that he provides, it I think is going to be a huge, huge year for Rui.
Yeah, and I don't even put it against him that he only had 5 rebounds because he had 3 offensive rebounds. And then if other guys are cleaning up for him and he's doing a good job rotating, he's probably not going to get the rebound because he's defending the shot. And Austin Reeves had 9 rebounds. AD had 16 rebounds. So I'm not too concerned about the overall total. I'm more looking at his overall energy and activity. And when you get 3 offensive rebounds and you're doing your job rotating, to me, it's like almost academic what his rebounding numbers are, as long as he gets like 5 as his baseline. But any last thoughts or any other guys you wanted to point out before we close this out?
I thought, one thing that we're going to have to be very careful about, I think, is Max Christie, because I think Max Christie is going to play a very critical role for this, or excuse me, I should say, we need Max Christie to play a critical role for this team. We know what he can do, but I feel like he's ever since like the first game of the preseason where he played pretty well, like ever since then, it's just been a lot of pressing from him. It doesn't feel like, he's not a bad shooter. I think he's a pretty good shooter, but he's taking a lot of awkward shots that are not
Mhm.
like in his bag right now. Like, three pointers are not all created equal. Max Christie is not a dribble behind a screen and take a 3 pointer off the dribble. That's not his game right now. He needs to be taking spot up threes or driving, and creating. And it feels like he's a little bit confused.
Mhm.
Defensively, I thought he looks great. And only other thing I'll say, because everybody else sort of Jaxson Hayes, I think looked
Yeah.
really good.
Mhm.
I'm not sure that he's the player, right? The specific player, but that archetype is exactly what this roster needs. And so if it's him, great. I mean, if we can get someone a little bit more defensive minded, I think ideal. But I think he fills a clear role for us, and I'm happy that he stayed. Last thing I'll say is the Bronny James situation. I thought was a really really nice moment. I
Yeah.
am appalled that there are so many disgusting people out there that have such a like it's okay. Everybody has their own opinion, and you can take it however you want. But people who are like wishing injury upon this family, or like harm to these people, or like acting like this is some sort of make-a-wish situation, can I just say, like, Bronny James is not even the worst prospect on this team. He's certainly not the worst player in the NBA. I wish that either of our two picks from last year showed any of the kind of promise that Bronny showed in his last, like, let's call it last 2 or 3 games in Vegas and the last game of the summer league. If JHS had one preseason game where he scored 17 points against NBA starters, I would be like, okay, maybe there's something to work with here. But, so it's like, but putting all that stuff aside, it's like the hate has been so over the top. And I just want to say to all those people, I'm very sorry for what your father did to you, but it doesn't mean that you need to take it out on somebody else, because this was an amazing moment. I literally was scrolling through Reddit comments. This is like the quality of
Uh,
people opining on this, right? And people were like, I'm sure there are other situations where this could have happened, but meaning a father and son could have played together in the NBA, but they didn't. The player probably didn't have the clout to force the team to pick his son. I'm like, you are so far out of the realm of reality that I don't even know what to tell you. The reason this is special is because LeBron James had Bronny when he was like 20, and has played until he is 40.
yeah.
Okay, that is why this is possible. Every other 40-year-old, and by the way, I did look this up today because I thought this was such an absurd comment because it's so easily verifiable. Every other player who has played this deep into their career has not even had a kid who is like of legal age,
Yeah.
or of college age to be drafted. That's why this is amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, it's like you can argue about, well, you shouldn't have been drafted, or blah, blah, blah. Whatever. Okay, the reason this is amazing is because this will probably never happen again. There will probably never be a player who is able to play as long as, to the point where he even has a son that is even in the realm of being eligible to play in the NBA, but just by strict numbers, okay? And so this is like the gross thing about this is people are not realizing that, like, that's really what is like what makes this special. Again, you can say, oh, Bronny should maybe be a G League player, or he shouldn't even be in the G League, whatever. I'm just talking about strict numbers. And I think the way that the team handled it was amazing. I think the way that JJ got rid of the distraction game one in the right time was amazing. And I think that, like, this is something that no one on the team seems to have a problem with. No one in the organization seems to have a
Yeah.
problem with. The only people who have a problem with it are a bunch of like keyboard warriors out there who have problems with their own father, I assume, because it's like there's no other reason to hate on something like this. It's a
Well,
special sports moment, and it's like rare, and it will probably never happen again in the NBA.
yeah, and the other argument though, the other argument that I've been seeing are the all of a sudden the pearl clutching basketball purists, Tommy, who are like, he didn't earn this. Why are we making this a spectacle? These 2 minutes, the Lakers' margin for error is so thin that if Bronny James is a -10 in these 2 minutes and we lose this game, this sets us up for not making the playoffs again. And to those people, you want to talk about overreactionary? Come on, man. Now you're going to be a basketball purist and talk about the purity of the game. Like, LeBron James is arguably the greatest player of all time. Do you want to know what's going to help the Lakers win? Making LeBron James happy. So, like
Yeah.
it's honestly as simple as that. If you want to take a long-term view of things,
Yeah.
let's not look at those 2 minutes in which Bronny James is -5, because at the end of the day, it doesn't fucking matter. It matters that LeBron James wanted to have this moment with his son. LeBron James deserves this moment with his son. And if you hear what he said post game, where he said, I gave up my life for this league and I had to miss so many moments for I had to miss so many of Bronny's moments, Bryce's moments, Zuri's moments. The fact that I get to play with him is the best gift that I ever could have got. When you hear the greatest of all time say that, you let him do whatever the hell he wants, because 2 minutes is not going to matter in the grand scheme of things, because LeBron James is happy and he is riding this high. And that's pretty much what I'll say. That's the last thing I'll say
Yeah.
on this subject. So,
Yeah,
um,
there's not, it takes a special kind of sick person, I feel like, to have a significant problem with this. And it goes again, it's gone beyond well, I think technically there was somebody better at 50, like, Ulrich Chomchi. I think we could have just taken him at 55
where did you
and that
pull
would have
that
been
name out of your ass?
because I was looking up who was drafted after Bronny recently, and I think that was one of the guys. So it's
Oh,
like,
man.
Ulrich Chomchi,
Wow,
maybe
then
he would have
now
been better.
Chauncey is going to be the next Jokic in the next year or
I know,
something. Just to...
exactly. Like, whatever. You can have that argument. You can have the argument that, like, a 3-year guarantee. And by the way, the minimum level of money he could have possibly received is too much. That's all fine, but like, it's gone beyond that.
Yeah.
And I like, we live in a society, and I just challenge people, like, get over your own, whatever you're feeling about this, and projecting onto the situation. Again, please get over it. I'm sorry, things haven't worked out for you, because I feel like that's the only reason you would have this much of a problem with it. The Bucks waived their 15th man to open a roster spot for Thanasis Antetokounmpo, who is spending the season recovering from a torn Achilles. So, and I'm, by the way, not saying, oh, well, they did it, so we can do it too. I'm just saying that, like, this is not actually, like, catering a 15th man roster spot to a star is not that unusual. And I don't know. It's gone so far to the point where it's like people are just, like, looking so far past Bronny as a prospect, like acting like he wouldn't have even made his, like, high school varsity team, when this guy is literally better than, I mean, honestly, like, that game against the Warriors in the preseason when he put 17 points up, I understand it was a 50-point blowout and whatever, nobody else played and somebody had to shoot. Who didn't score 17 points? JHS and Maxwell Lewis. So, he has shown some promise that I wish we had seen in some of our prior picks. And to suggest that because of your own insecurities or issues, that he's so far outside of being a real NBA player, it's just like, it's almost not worth engaging. But this is like what I wanted to get off my chest,
Sure.
and that's it.
Yeah, and if you're gonna nitpick on this, like, quote unquote farce or whatever, then you have to nitpick on every farce we've ever seen in the league, and there have been many, including Kobe Bryant's last 60-point game. Are we nitpicking that game and being like, hey,
I
that
was going to
doesn't
say,
count? And I'm like, no, everybody
this
glorifies that game.
the same people who have an issue with Bronny, in the 2 minutes he played last night, are those people must have watched Kobe's last game, and instead of saying, wow, what an epic performance, they instead turned around and said, well, this was a wasted development opportunity for D'Angelo Russell and Jordan Clarkson and Julius Randle. I'm
Exactly.
serious,
No,
right? It's like,
that's the
it's
same
like that
rationale. Yeah.
same, it's the same energy. And it's just, like, so pathetic. But whatever. People need to get their hate out there, so they push it on the most successful, one of the, if not the most successful, certainly one of the top 2 or 3 most successful players in NBA history, and his family. And by the way, a guy who, by all accounts, has lived a good life, and has not let any of the star stuff like affect his family life, and didn't grow up with like
A dad.
both parents
Yeah.
around, and yeah, and wanted to make the life for his kids different, and by all accounts it seems to be an amazing father. So like I just like, there's no real negative way to look at this. Even the TNT audio clip where like LeBron is sitting on the bench next to
Yeah.
Bronny and like telling him like, are you're noticing the
That was cool.
intensity, and like just go play free, like giving him like that father son advice. Again, I'm sorry if your father was not there to give you that type of advice. I'm sorry if you haven't had a son, and you haven't been able to experience that for yourself. That is special. Okay.
Yeah.
And that was not some manufactured thing. It's like, yeah, we took Bronny, but again, it's like, he's not even the worst player on this team, like not even close. And if you think that, you have not watched Jalen Shafino play. So,
Yeah.
that's the last thing I'll say.
And also, you know what else is a farce? LeBron James coming to the Lakers and saving our franchise from the depths of disparity.